Why did no one hear her beneath the rain? Why did none of them sense that something was already moving under the Black River, silent as memory, patient as vengeance? The night was swollen with water. Heavy rain pounded the mangrove swamps until the air itself seemed to drown. Mud rose in choking swirls. Rotting leaves floated in clumps, carrying the stench of death along every current. And in that suffocating jungle darkness, a squad of American Navy SEALs waded chest-deep, their rifles shivering just above the floodline. Their ammunition was nearly gone. The radios crackled with broken static. The weight of despair pressed heavier than their gear. Enemy flashlights combed the riverbanks in hungry arcs, weaving beams across the water like predators searching for blood. One man whispered into his headset, voice hollow, surrender already wrapped around his words. "We're finished, no way out." They formed a desperate circle, muzzles pointed outward, soaked to the bone, chest deep, waiting for the end. From the darkness ahead, a speedboat engine snarled. Then a megaphone cut through the rain. "Americans, nowhere to run, you die tonight." The voice was certain, cruel, confident in victory, and in that moment it seemed true. Defeat had a sound. It had the weight of silence, the slump of men who stopped hopping. But then the river stirred. No one saw it at first, just a ripple, just a breath. Beneath the surface, something alive and waiting rose into the storm, and when she broke through, no one had time to even whisper her name. A woman emerged from the depths, scarred face lit by lightning, eyes burning with a fury too human to be mistaken for anything else. In her hands, not a rifle, not a pistol, but a massive crossbow. The bolt gleamed. It sang through the rain, slicing air like fate itself. It struck the enemy's ammunition cache. Night turned into fire. The speedboat erupted in a chain of explosions. The jungle screamed with shockwaves. Bodies and debris were flung across the Black River, voices shrieking in terror. And through that chaos, a whisper spread like ghost fire. "She's here, the river ghost." That was the night Maya Cortez was reborn. And legends are born in moments when death is certain, yet somehow denied. But the river doesn't give legends easily. It takes something first. It takes everything. 3 years earlier, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The rain wasn't falling that day. The air was clean, the training pool still, the sound of water broken only by a lone swimmer moving like a shadow beneath the surface. Arms slicing, lungs silent, minutes passing without a breath. Master Sergeant Frank Morgan stood with arms folded, jaw tight. At 57, his weathered face carried more wars than most history books. Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm. His body was a map of scars. His eyes were blunt tools, sharpened only by what they'd seen. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not today. This was the day he should have been signing retirement papers, finally walking away from 3 decades of blood and dirt. But instead, Commander Phillips had called him in. "There's this female candidate," Phillips had said. "Part of the integration program. Different. I need your assessment." Morgan hadn't cared about politics or programs. He cared about survival, about standards. A SEAL had one job: complete the mission, bring the team home. Gender meant nothing against that weight. So he came, reluctantly, to see what kind of different Phillips was selling. 4 minutes had passed, 5, still no surface. Finally she rose from the water, controlled, unshaken, not gasping, not desperate, just calm, eyes steady as she climbed out of the pool. "Maya Cortez," Morgan muttered, glancing at the file in his hand. 25, Colombian American, immigrated at 15, enlisted at 18, communications specialist, volunteer for the new SEAL integration program. But no line on any file explained what he'd just seen. 5 minutes 12 seconds, Morgan said. His voice was gravel, unimpressed by miracles. "Impressive breath control. Your shooting scores, however." He flipped the file closed. "Barely passing. Explain." She looked up at him. No fear, no flinch at his rank, just calm, almost surgical evaluation. Water is my home, Sergeant. Guns are just tools I'm learning. SEALs don't get to choose their tools, Morgan replied, voice hard. I'm working on it, no excuse, no apology, just simple, steady fact. He studied her, compact frame, efficient build, not bulky like most. Useful, maybe. And something else, scars along her back, faint but strange, not bullets, not blades, more like punctures. His instincts whispered warnings he couldn't yet name. Report to the range tomorrow, 0500. Yes, Sergeant. She turned to leave, but the silence between them said more than her words. There was something buried in her, and Morgan had spent 30 years recognizing soldiers who carried ghosts. This one was carrying an entire river. But the river doesn't begin with legends. It begins with a child. Columbia, 1985. Dawn on the Magdalena River, mist like a veil over the water. 10-year-old Maya crouched in a wooden canoe, holding her breath as her father adjusted the crossbow in her hands. Carlos Cortez, hunter, teacher, something more, though she wouldn't know it yet. Patience, he whispered. We don't fight the river, we become part of it. She watched him regulate his breathing, his chest barely moving, his eyes sharp as the water itself. She mimicked him, learning to slow her own heartbeat to fire between its rhythms. But before the lesson could end, the river spoke differently. A motorboat roared past, men with rifles staring hard at the jungle. Drug runners. Maya saw her father's hands tighten around his crossbow, eyes darkened from gentle teacher into something else. Papa, why do they come to our river? Carlos sighed, voice heavy as if the answer itself carried centuries. Because they think power comes from what they take. They don't understand. True power comes from what you protect. That night men came to their village. Not cartel, but men with American accents and clean clothes. They spoke in whispers with her father. Her mother paced. The air was tense, fragile. Maya listened from her hammock as her parents argued. They'll know it was you, her mother pleaded. The cartels will kill us, think of Maya. Carlos's voice was firm. I am thinking of her. What future will she have if we do nothing? Some fights choose us, Elena, you know that. She closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. But she knew. She knew her father was more than a hunter, that his crossbow was more than a tool for food. He was fighting a secret war. The next morning her childhood ended in fire. Explosions tore through the village. Gunfire ripped the dawn apart. Her mother dragged her to a hidden boat, shoving her inside, clutching her father's crossbow wrapped in oilcloth. Your father is covering our escape, her mother said through tears, but Maya knew he wasn't coming. By nightfall they were gone, carried away on a cargo ship bound for America. Her father's crossbow clutched in her small hands, the promise of vengeance etched into its wood, for those who cannot fight. And in that moment a seed was planted, a promise the river itself seemed to whisper. One day she would return. One day she would carry the ghost of Carlos Cortez back into the water. Years later at Fort Bragg, when Frank Morgan told her to bring whatever she'd been practicing with in secret, Maya unwrapped that same crossbow. It gleamed under the dim light. Not a relic, not a toy, but an extension of her will. Family heirloom, Morgan asked. My father's, her voice didn't tremble. Show me. She drew, fired. The bolt hit center mass with enough force to punch through body armor. Morgan whistled low. Now that's a connection. And from that night forward her training was doubled. By day she followed the rules, learning the SEAL way. By night she became something else. A shadow with a crossbow, a ghost being sharpened. Morgan knew what he was creating. He also knew what it might cost. But sometimes the rule book got soldiers killed. And sometimes survival meant embracing the unexpected. He just didn't yet know how far that choice would echo. Because one day the river ghost would rise. Why did Rodriguez hesitate when he read her name? Why did the lieutenant's eyes linger on the scar that traced across her cheek? as if he saw something the rest of the team had missed. Afghanistan, dust swirling, mountains cutting the sky into jagged teeth. The year was 1996. Maya Cortez was a rookie in the field, though her training had already carved away any trace of rookie hesitation. She had earned her place, even if no one had given her the benefit of believing it. Her role was support, communications, medical backup, not assault, not the front line. Lieutenant James Rodriguez commanded the task force, sharp, seasoned, with the kind of confidence that came from surviving battles most men never returned from. He had read her file. He had read Morgan's notes, but trust in war wasn't earned with paper. It was earned in blood. When he assigned her to sit with radios and patch wounds, Maya's only answer had been, "Understood, sir." But inside, she burned. She hadn't carried her father's lessons across an ocean to count rounds and wait. The mission went bad fast. They'd planned for 6 guards. 20 materialized from the compound, armed with heavy weapons firing with deadly precision. The mountains echoed with gunfire. Dust clouds swallowed men whole. Rodriguez's team was pinned. "Cortez," Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comms. "We need fire on the east approach, now." Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed her rifle, sprinted toward a rocky outcrop, and poured suppressing fire into the advancing fighters. Bullets chipped stone inches from her face. She shifted, breath slow, fired again. Calm, steady, her father's training patience between heartbeats. The opening was enough. 2 wounded SEALs made it back to cover. The team survived that night because she refused to be invisible. But even then, Maya saw something the others didn't. Amid the chaos, a figure stood on a distant ridge. Not firing, not hiding, watching, directing. The enemy's movements were too coordinated, too disciplined. These weren't villagers with guns. They were soldiers. Someone was orchestrating them. Back at base, she reported what she'd seen. An external advisor, military-trained, professional hand signals. The intelligence officers dismissed it. Taliban have trained fighters from various groups, nothing unusual. But Rodriguez had noticed. He had seen the precision in her cover fire. He had seen her hold her ground without flinching. He pulled her aside, his voice low. "You handled yourself well. Next mission, your forward team." It should have felt like victory, but Maya knew something wasn't right. 2 weeks later, they returned to the field. Another compound, another high-value target, the kind of mission SEALs rehearsed in their sleep. Rodriguez raised his hand to breach, and that's when Maya saw it. "Sir, hold." Her voice cut through the rain. It carried urgency that made even veterans pause. "What is it?" "The hinges," she whispered. "They're reversed. Recon photos showed them on the left, now they're on the right. Someone rebuilt this entrance." Rodriguez froze. He studied the door, subtle, almost invisible, but she was right. "Daniels, check it." The specialist confirmed it within minutes. A pressure plate wired to explosives that would have killed them all. They disarmed it. They entered cautiously, but inside there was no target, only maps, surveillance photos, detailed diagrams of their own base. It wasn't a mission, it was bait. When the gunfire hit them, it came from every side, coordinated, disciplined, not tribal warbands, soldiers, the same pattern as before. "Command, we are compromised," Rodriguez shouted into the comms, requesting immediate air support. The reply came, cold as stone. "Negative, Bravo 6. All assets committed elsewhere, hold position." They had been abandoned. Maya knew it then. Someone had set them up. She whispered into Rodriguez's ear, calm even as bullets shredded trees around them. "I can draw them east, you move west." "That's suicide." "I can move through terrain they won't expect, trust me." Something in her voice convinced him. He gave the order, the team shifted. Maya slipped away. She lobbed a flashbang into their flank, buying seconds of chaos. Rodriguez moved his men. But then, the second explosion came from behind them. Not enemy fire, their own ordnance, triggered remotely. The world went white. Maya's body lifted into the air. Shrapnel tore across her face and chest. She glimpsed the figure on the ridge again, still watching. Then, darkness. She awoke 3 weeks later in Walter Reed Medical Center. Her body burned with pain. Her reflection was no longer hers. The scars across her cheek and temple would never fade. But the worst wound was the report they handed her. Equipment malfunction, accidental detonation during extraction. It was a lie, and lies were weapons. They buried truth deeper than bodies. 3 of her team were dead. Rodriguez was alive but broken, paralyzed from the waist down. The survivors were reassigned quietly. No investigation, no accountability. When she was able to walk, she used Morgan's number. The one he had pressed into her hand with a warning. Trust is earned, not issued with dog tags. He arrived the same day, civilian clothes, eyes sharp. "They're calling it an accident," she said, voice flat. "It wasn't," Morgan replied. His jaw was set like stone. "What did you see?" She told him, the reversed hinges, the ambush, the figure on the ridge. He nodded grimly. "I've made inquiries. Your mission was top secret. Only 6 people had your coordinates. One of them sold you out." Her chest tightened. "Who?" "Victor Ramirez." The name struck her like a blade. Ramirez, the CIA liaison in Colombia, the man who had sold out her father a decade earlier. Her father's betrayal and her team's betrayal were the same. Different wars, same man, same poison. Morgan leaned close. "He's climbed high, deputy director now, too powerful to accuse without proof. You'll be reassigned, logistics, support. Let them think you're broken. Meanwhile, we'll build a case." "And my team," Maya whispered. "They buried your team with paperwork." His voice was iron. "We'll get them justice, but you need to survive first." She touched the bandages on her face. Scar tissue pulled tight against her skin. Soldiers glanced away now. Some whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Scarface damaged goods. She let them, she played the part. She buried her rage beneath silence. Because vengeance had patience. Beneath the scars, Maya Cortez was becoming something else. Something the system would never see coming. Something Ramirez would never expect. The river ghost had been born twice now, once in childhood, once in fire. And she was waiting. Fort Bragg a year later. The warehouse smelled of dust, oil, and neglect. Boxes stacked high with equipment. Maya moved through it like a ghost, head bowed beneath her cap. The scar was silver now, a mark across her face that turned conversations into silence. This was where they'd buried her. Logistics, counting parts, moving crates, filing forms, invisible, forgotten. Exactly where they thought she belonged. She cataloged supplies with mechanical precision. Waterproof casings, carbon fiber, adhesives, pieces that could disappear one at a time without raising alarms. Her father had taught her to see tools where others saw junk. She was building something, quietly, patiently. When Commander Phillips called her into his office, she sat in silence, waiting for the dismissal she expected. Instead, he pushed a file toward her. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," Phillips said, "he's requested you." Her heart faltered. "He's alive." "Wheelchair, intelligence desk. He wants you on his support team." Rodriguez had not forgotten. He hadn't believed the lies either. And just like that, the river began to stir again. Because some ghosts don't fade. Some ghosts wait for the right current. And Maya Cortez was ready to follow it. Why did Phillips hesitate before sliding the badge across the desk? Why did his voice lower, almost as if someone might be listening through the walls? "Room 237, he said quietly. "Report there tomorrow." Maya picked up the security pass, her scar catching the office light. She didn't ask questions, but she felt them burning behind her lips. Her reassignment was official now. No longer just boxes and inventory, not just hiding. Rodriguez had asked for her, and in a system that had all but erased her, the request meant something. Room 237 had once been a forgotten storage bay. Now it hummed with life. Computer stations lined the walls. Maps covered boards like veins crossing a body. Surveillance photos pinned with coded notes. It wasn't a war room. It was something smaller, something sharper. At the center, Rodriguez sat in a wheelchair, his back straighter than most men standing. Months of hospitals had aged him, his muscles withered, but his eyes were still seal eyes. "Permission to speak freely, sir," Maya asked after standard greetings. "Granted," he said, then he smiled faintly. "And drop the sir when we're alone. This isn't the kind of unit that cares about titles." She scanned the room, noting cameras, angles, blind spots, old instincts. "Is this space secure?" Rodriguez gestured toward a small device humming in the corner. "Swept hourly. Morgan set it up. We get 12 minutes of silence each cycle. Make them count." At Morgan's name, something in her chest eased. She trusted him. She had to. Rodriguez leaned forward. "You think I blame you, Afghanistan?" Her voice was steady, but her breath caught. "I saw the way you looked at me. The door, the ambush I should have." "You warned us," Rodriguez interrupted. "You spotted the trap before anyone else. You gave us a diversion that should have saved us, but someone triggered our explosives remotely. Not Taliban, not chance. It was planned." He wheeled himself closer, his voice lowering. "And I've spent every day since proving it." On the wall behind him, strings of red lines connected photos, names, wire transfers, blurred intelligence reports. And at the center, pinned with more lines than any other face, was Victor Ramirez. The sight of him punched the breath from Maya's chest. The same man who had killed her father. The same man whose shadow had followed her team into Afghanistan. Rodriguez's voice hardened. "Morgan believes Ramirez has been playing both sides for decades, feeding intel to cartels, eliminating rivals, cashing favors with CIA brass. Afghanistan wasn't the first time, just the most visible." Her hands clenched into fists. The scar across her cheek seemed to pulse. "My father tried to expose him," she said quietly. "It got him killed." Rodriguez's eyes flickered recognition, confirmation. "I know. Morgan told me. That's why I asked for you. This isn't just about what happened to us. It's bigger. A cancer that's been rotting our institutions from the inside." Maya studied the board. She saw bank transfers between South American cartels and Middle Eastern extremists. She saw photographs of known terrorists sitting across from cartel lieutenants. She saw Ramirez's name threaded through it all like a parasite binding host to host. "What's the endgame?" she asked. "Power, money, leverage," Rodriguez said. "It started with Cold War logic. Use dirty men to fight bigger monsters, but the line blurred. Ramirez stopped fighting monsters. He started feeding them." Maya turned back toward him. "So what now?" Rodriguez slid a file across the desk. "Operation Kingfisher." 3 days from now," he said. "A SEAL team inserts into northern Colombia. Official target, a fuel depot. Intel supplied by Ramirez himself. Same patterns as Afghanistan. Kill zone disguised as mission. 50 hostiles with heavy weapons waiting for them." She scanned the details. The terrain, the timing, it was all too perfect, too neat. "Who's leading the team?" "Commander Peterson. Good man, by the book. He'll march them straight into the fire." "And we can't warn them." Rodriguez shook his head bitterly. "Not without proof. Peterson would report any unofficial intel immediately. Ramirez has covered himself. If we raise alarm, it'll be dismissed as paranoia from a wounded officer." He tapped his own legs. "PTSD. Convenient label." Maya stared at the file, her scar tightening with the pressure of her jaw. "Then don't warn them. Insert me instead." Rodriguez blinked. "You're out of combat roles, administrative exile." My medical clearance was reinstated last month. Communications and medical support. That's all they'll see. Ramirez won't expect me. He'll think I'm still buried in logistics. Rodriguez studied her, the calculation in her eyes, the fury, the patience. You'd be walking into a trap you already know exists. Her voice was quiet, almost calm. Some traps can be reversed. Rodriguez held her gaze for a long time. Finally, he nodded. Phillips can push the paperwork. Last-minute addition. Support role only. But Maya, if Ramirez realizes who you are, he'll erase you completely. She didn't flinch. He can try, others have failed. And with that, her course was set. Morgan's cabin was hidden in the pines, a fortress of silence miles from anyone who could listen. When Maya arrived, he was waiting. He already knew. Rodriguez had called. 3 days, Morgan said, opening the door. Colombia, Operation Kingfisher. They stepped into his workshop. The air smelled of oil, metal, and cordite. Tools lined every wall. Components were laid out in ordered chaos. And at the center, resting on a velvet-lined case, was the crossbow, her father's weapon rebuilt. Morgan unlocked the case. Time to finish it. For hours they worked. Reinforced carbon fiber, precision trigger, modular bolts with hidden payloads, explosive tips, EMP jammers, signal scramblers. 10 bolts only, enough for chaos, not excess. Each piece clicked into place with the finality of fate. When it was done, Morgan studied her, eyes heavy with something close to regret. This isn't just about Ramirez, not anymore. He's a symptom. There's a system that lets men like him thrive. If you take him down, you'll be facing all of it. Maya slid the last bolt into its quiver. Her scar glinted in the low light. Her voice was flat, unshaken. I've been facing it since they killed my father. Morgan placed a hand on her shoulder. Then remember what he taught you. The river doesn't rush. It waits. Patience is your weapon. She nodded, but patience had teeth, and the river was ready to bite. Langley, Virginia. Victor Ramirez sat in his office, immaculate in his bespoke suit, silver hair combed back, walls lined with commendations from 3 administrations. To anyone else, he was the perfect image of a patriot. But when the office door locked, when surveillance was cut, he reached for the satellite phone hidden in his safe. "Confirm, Kingfisher," he said. The voice on the other end was smooth, accented. Raphael Domings. "My men are in place. 50 soldiers, heavy weapons. They won't leave the river alive." Ramirez leaned back in his chair, satisfied. "I want confirmation. Dog tags, all of them." "For the price you're paying," Domings promised, "I'll deliver them myself." And with that, Ramirez closed the loop. The seals would die. The evidence would burn. And once again, betrayal would be filed as equipment malfunction. Only one loose thread remained. Maya Cortez. Her file had been buried, her name lost among logistics rosters. He skimmed it now, frowning. Colombian heritage, scarred in Afghanistan, daughter of Carlos Cortez. His blood ran cold for the briefest second. Carlos Cortez, the informant who had almost ruined him, the man whose death had made his career. And now his daughter was alive. He whispered it aloud, the ghost's daughter. For a moment unease flickered, but he pushed it away. She was nothing, a scarred support specialist, damaged goods, and when Peterson's team died, she would die with them. Poetic, really. The river had taken her father. Now it would take her too. Fort Bragg briefing room, the day before deployment. Maps spread across glowing screens. Peterson walked the team through insertion points, his tone crisp, confident. 20 guards, standard arms, no heavy weapons reported, simple hit and run. Maya sat at the back, silent, watching. She knew the truth. 50 men, heavy weapons, kill zone. But she said nothing. Peterson barely glanced at her when assigning roles. Cortez, communications with Williams, medical support at Bravo. You don't move forward unless ordered, clear. Yes, sir. Her voice didn't shake. But William's older, weathered, eyes sharp, gave her a look that lingered. When Peterson dismissed them, he approached her quietly. "You were in Afghanistan," he said. She met his gaze. "Yes." He nodded at her scar. "Those weren't ordinary Taliban we faced. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." Her silence was answer enough. Williams lowered his voice. "This mission brief feels the same. Too clean, too neat." For the first time in a long while, Maya felt something stir. Not hope, but recognition. Williams saw it too. "Official reports say a lot of things," he said. "But in the field, truth doesn't hide. Not for long." She nodded once. They both knew. And the river was waiting. Why did the river feel like a throat tightening around their throats? Why did Maya hear a rhythm there, old as hunger, that none of the men in the zodiacs could feel? Rain had turned the jungle into a living cathedral. Leaves shed water like whispered secrets. The river ran heavy and cold, carrying more than timber and silt. It carried expectation. The seals moved like machines trained to slice through danger, precise, fast, certain. Maya sat low in the second boat, communication gear at her knees, rain beating on the brim of her cap. Her uniform was standard. Her paperwork was standard. Her clearance was standard. Her heartbeat was not. She listened, not to radios, not to orders. She listened to the water. The current had its own signal, eddies, pull, a soft warning under the surface. Her father had taught her to read that language before she could read a map. Tonight it spoke of traps and of waiting. At Checkpoint Alpha they parked the Zodiacs and moved inland, Peterson's team slicing through the jungle with the kind of choreography born of years on the same circuit. Maya remained at Bravo with Williams. She set up the relay with steady hands, hiding the slick case that held the last disassembled parts of her father's crossbow among environmental monitoring gear. She wore the role they'd given her, competent, obedient, invisible. Pride and anger braided themselves together, pride for the life she'd earned, anger because they still thought her broken. She let both sit quiet like stones in her belly. Peterson's voice came over the net, clipped and professional. "Advance to waypoint 2, maintain radio discipline." No one questioned his cadence. No one expected deviation. That was the plan Ramirez had bet on, obedience. Rain made the forest a smear of sound and low visibility. Night vision turned foliage into green marble. Engines hummed softly, muffled. Maya's fingers moved over frequency dials like a pianist. Williams watched her for a long moment, not intrusive, not hostile, just assessing the one they'd pressed into this mission. He said things that matched the pattern in her head. Too clean, too neat. He had the look of a man who had seen too many neat plans die. When he turned his back to adjust transmitters, the small piece between them broke with a sound only she heard, the faint clink of metal within a case. Her hands steadied. Determination washed over her like a cold tide. She'd rehearsed this sequence in 1,000 private nights. She assembled the crossbow with the same ritual care she'd learned as a child, components clicking, limbs locking, the scent of oil and carbon like a prayer. Each motion was a promise. 10 bolts, 10 chances to tilt fate. The weapon felt like her father's hand all over again, firm, uncompromising. Her breath slowed. Patience, he would have said. The river waits for the right heartbeat. Time moves differently when you are carrying more than your own life. The assault team moved into the dark. Maya heard the cadence of their radio bursts decline, longer gaps, then nothing. Her pulse tightened. 15 minutes until Peterson reached the supposed target. 20 until the ambush would likely trigger. Voices on the riverbank whispered rumor as the rain thickened. She checked the modified bolts, silent penetration heads, one with a compact explosive charge for infrastructure, another with an EMP module to scramble comms. 4 remained that could change the battlefield. Her fingers brushed each shaft as if to weigh them. Hope and calculation folded into one, make their chaos mean survival, not slaughter. Movement in the jungle was a grammar she could read with her eyes closed. A sway, a broken twig, a bite out of moss where boots had pressed too recently. She watched 3 men slip into position below her. Scouts, professional, light steps. Communication devices clipped to their vests, their formations were rehearsed. She recognized the profile, former soldiers, now paid to erase witnesses. Anger flared. The same hands that had silenced her father's voice now moved to cut down others. But she did not rush. She remembered her father telling her that the river does not leap. It waits, kill when it is inevitable. When the first scout paused to adjust a receiver, she let breath go between 2 heartbeats and released the bolt. The jungle drank the sound. The man slumped without a cry. Rain masked the whisper of flight. The bolt slipped invisible as a thought. 2 more followed in the same cold logic, one while he squinted at a GPS, the other while he wiped rain from his optic. Each fall was surgical, deliberate. Maya's hands moved like the water, efficient, patient, lethal. She felt no exultation, only the tight focus of someone carrying forward a promise. She was not a monster. She was a hunter honoring debt. The third scout twisted just as her bolt found bone. The shot grazed the shoulder. He bled, alarmed. He frantically swept with his weapon. Rain and foliage hid her approach at first, but he managed a few rounds in her general direction before she dropped from above, blade between ribs. Seconds stretched. She took his radio and tools, verified frequencies, and found exactly what she feared. Maps, camouflaged satellite links, photographs of Peterson's team marked with red excess. Someone had made sure identification would be clear to the men whose job was killing. Rage, cold and clean, sat in the hollows of her chest. Proof burned like fire in her hands. Back on the net, Williams relayed a calm, measured voice. All clear from Alpha, no anomalies. His tone hid suspicion. He had faith in procedure. He had an operator's denial to external doubt. He had not yet seen what she had in her palm. She pushed the evidence into a waterproof pack and nudged Williams with the old game. Keep routine, not alarm. Better to act from the inside of order than from the ragged edge of exile. Peterson's team moved through moonlit ferns toward their objective, the jungle swallowing their shapes with practiced silence. Maya's earpiece carried the quiet of men sliding into the teeth of a plan. She watched their silhouettes tighten into the clearing. Her breath slowed until she could hear the river's pull again. Good. They were on time. On cue. Soon the trap would snap. She had to change the parameters, not to negate the killing, to change who died. She set her sight on the compound's auxiliary storehouse. Intelligence Martinez hadn't provided this. Morgan and Rodriguez had. A small structure likely to hold rounds and fuel. If she could turn that into a focal point of destruction, the ambush's neat geometry would crumble. Explosions, when choreographed correctly, did not just break things, they break attention. They make confusion. They make mistakes. They make survival. She loaded a bolt with the explosive payload, calculated wind, slope, and the way rain buffeted a projectile in the dark. Her finger found the trigger the way an old lover finds a pulse, familiar, intimate. The bolt sailed. For a beat she felt suspended with it. The world tightened. Then the impact. Napalm of ammunition cooking off. The storage ignited like a fallen star. Light tore through night. The compound erupted into smaller suns. Chaos, finally allowed to breathe, spilled everywhere. Men that had been counted and placed in iron rows scattered like ants. The ambush's lines blurred. Enemies nearest the explosion were eliminated. Enemies further back fanned outward, lost in smoke and fire. Peterson's team hit ground fast, improvising, their training bending into survival. Maya watched through her scope as men she'd only just shared a bench with reacted like professionals. A suppression team here, a rally there. They were still men, they were still salvageable. Ramirez's plan had anticipated a neat kill. He had not planned for a river ghost with a father's crossbow and a sergeant's blessing to carve disorder into his steps. Maya felt the cold satisfaction of a surgeon closing a wound, then a weight settle in her chest. Ramirez might survive the night. Domings might scramble away. The system that shielded them would still be there. But tonight, 8 men had been given a fighting chance. That would have to do. She reloaded another bolt, targeting an armored vehicle making for extraction. The shot found the roof hatch. The explosion sent metal and men like bread tossed into a storm. Ramirez himself was thrown into the open, cursing crimson bright on his hands. He scrambled for cover. Domings, if he was still in the compound, disappeared into the smoke like a shadow hunting his own escape. Morgan's voice came through, steady and distant, confirmation pinging their secret net. Rodriguez monitored from the safe room, his fingers ghosting across keys like he could move fate with them. The plan was working, but it was ugly and incomplete, like justice in a world sown with lies. Then the secondary teams moved. The attempt to hit Bravo unfurled, trained fighters aiming to sweep the river's support and sever the story. Maya heard Williams' voice tighten. Heavy contact, multiple vectors. His hands were steady, a practiced calm over an anxious core. She had expected this. She had counted on it. She hadn't counted on the small, venomous thing that hit her in the shoulder when a stray round clipped her side. Pain bloomed white-hot, a sudden and ugly reminder that armor doesn't grant immunity. Blood darkened her sleeve. For a moment, the world narrowed to heat and the river's cold truth. Nothing is free. She tasted metal and thought of her mother's hands on a small boat years ago. Brokenness arrived without ceremony. Brokenness did not mean surrender. She gritted through the pain, setting a handful of modified flash devices into the water where their pressure wave would disorient approaching fighters, and then activated the voice modulator Morgan had coded into a leaf of electronics. The modulated voice rolled through the canopy in a dozen directions, two men speaking at once, calling orders that overlapped and contradicted. "Don't breathe. The river claims you." It echoed in Spanish, in the crooked rhythms of folklore. Men who had been trained to trust each other began to look at one another the way men look at strangers when their world shudders. Fear is a weapon as potent as a magazine of rounds. She struck from above where she could, knife through a neck, a disabling slash to limbs, calculated wounds meant to shatter cohesion and keep a man alive. It was surgical. It was cruel in the most honest way, precise, necessary. When the secondary team broke and staggered back, voices ragged and communications fractured, Maya eased down into the open and let rain wash the blood from her face. Williams moved to help Morrison. His gaze met hers for the first time with something like recognition. Pride flickered there, not the loud kind, but the quiet approval of a man who understands what it takes to not only kill but to save. Peterson's men staggered into Bravo, grit and smoke in their mouths, wounded but breathing. Peterson's jaw had set into hard lines, and for a long second he simply looked at Maya without the earlier dismissal. The truth of what she'd done sat between them like a bridge built of fire and rain. He said nothing at first. He did not need to. His hands were steady as he assessed wounds, his voice quick and professional as he took stock of men alive. Later, when night settled into a jagged quiet and the damp air smelled of iron and diesel, he would hand her a cigarette and say, "You did right." That would be all. Sometimes that was all a man like Peterson could give. In the trees above the compound, amidst smoke and flame, Ramirez crawled into a ditch and cursed his luck. He had been clever, he had been careful, but he had not been patient enough to reckon with a woman who had been raised on rivers where patience is everything. His extraction staggered, Domings was slipping away. The rot in the system had not been cleansed, but it had been interrupted. For a few hours, the ledger would show different numbers. For a few hours, 8 men would count the night in breaths rather than paperwork. Maya knelt by the riverbank, wet and tired, the crossbow leaning against her shoulder like a sleeping animal. Pain throbbed through her wound. Her body wanted to fold into the dark and stay there forever, but she had a packet to secure, evidence to move, a father's promise to carry forward. She pulled one of the scout's cameras from her pack and keyed a dry packet to an encrypted drop Morgan had given her. "Evidence stored," she whispered into the rain, "for those who will listen." Hope is a small thing in a country where promises are spent like bullets, but for the first time in a long while that small thing warmed her chest. She had not saved everyone. She had not toppled the tower, but she had carved a crack in it. The river had done its work tonight and she had been its instrument. As dawn threatened the horizon, she let herself feel the quiet pride of having kept good men alive, and she let herself feel the brokenness of what she had had to do it. Between those two truths she stood. The river had taken her father. It had given her a way to answer him. And somewhere, in the hum of a satellite link and the rustle of pine miles away, Morgan and Rodriguez would be planning what came next. The work was far from over. The system would push back. Men like Ramirez did not retreat because of a single night. But tonight, for 8 breaths, the world had switched sides, and that was enough to go on. Why did Peterson go silent in the debriefing room? Why did his jaw lock, as if a single wrong word would erase every man who had survived? Fort Bragg 2 weeks later. The fluorescent lights hummed like insects. Air conditioning rattled. Maya sat at the far end of the long table, hands folded, scar in full view. Around her, Peterson's men filled the chairs, shoulders bandaged, faces pale, eyes carrying the weight of what they'd seen. Rodriguez was not here. Morgan was not here. Just officers in pressed uniforms, papers stacked neat, pens ready to bleed lies. A colonel with steel hair adjusted his glasses. Operation Kingfisher. Casualties 4 KIA, 7 wounded, enemy resistance heavier than expected. Cause faulty reconnaissance, any disagreements. Peterson's eyes lifted. He hesitated. Every man in the room felt it, that single second of defiance. Then his gaze dropped. No, sir. The lie landed like a stone. Maya's fingers tightened in her lap. Her throat burned, but she said nothing. She had learned silence from the river. The system was a flood. Push against it too hard and you drowned. Better to wait. Better to carve stone slowly. The colonel signed the report. Pages flipped. Dismissed. Chairs scraped. Boots echoed. Outside, the men lit cigarettes and leaned against the concrete wall. Some laughed bitterly. Some stared into nothing. Peterson lit one too, his hand shaking slightly. When Maya stepped past him, his voice stopped her. "You saved us." She turned. He didn't meet her eyes. "That's all I can say. You saved us." It was not enough, but it was something. That night, Maya didn't go to the barracks. She drove, past the wire fences, past the quiet neighborhoods, into the woods, to the cabin where Morgan waited. The fire crackled low. Maps were spread across his table. Rodriguez's voice hummed through a secured speaker. "You were right," Rodriguez said. "Kingfisher was a setup. Ramirez orchestrated it. Domings provided the men, but Peterson won't testify, neither will the survivors." Maya's jaw ached from how hard she clenched it. "They're afraid." "They're soldiers," Morgan corrected. "They know what happens to whistleblowers. Careers end. Families targeted. Men like Ramirez don't just protect themselves with paperwork. They protect themselves with fear." Rodriguez's voice was colder than the static it carried. "And Ramirez knows you survived. He won't make the same mistake twice." Maya leaned against the wall, the crossbow case beside her. Her shoulder throbbed from the wound she'd taken in Colombia. A reminder. Pain was memory made flesh. Morgan finally looked up. His face was carved in shadow. "You need to decide, Maya. Do you stay inside the system, where you'll be watched, silenced, contained? Or do you step outside, where you'll have nothing but the weapon in your hands and the ghosts you carry?" The silence stretched. She thought of her father. She thought of Rodriguez in his wheelchair, still fighting with only his mind. She thought of Peterson swallowing the truth. She thought of Ramirez, comfortable in his office, certain his chains of power would never break. Her voice was steady. "Outside." Morgan nodded once. "Then we stop waiting for justice, we make it." Her disappearance was quiet. Official paperwork said she was rotated to reserve status for medical rehabilitation. She turned in her rifle, her sidearm, her uniform, but the crossbow remained, always. She moved through the shadows of cities where uniforms meant nothing. Bogotá, Caracas, Panama City, places where old wars lingered in alleys and new ones were born in nightclubs and shipping yards. She listened. She learned. She followed money where bullets had once led her. And slowly, a name began to whisper in the underworld. The river ghost. At first it was a rumor, a faceless assassin, a phantom who struck at night, leaving bodies with bolts through radios, through maps, through the hands of men who signed betrayal. Then it became a story. Soldiers refused to patrol certain rivers. Cartel lieutenants refused to meet in jungle towns. Enemies swore they had seen her eyes glowing in rain. And then it became a fear. A convoy burned in the Darien Gap, its cargo, weapons meant for Ramirez's buyers, gone. A safe house in Medellin collapsed after its supports were shattered with explosive bolts. A cartel accountant defected, leaving files on a CIA black site's payroll leaks. No one saw her arrive. No one saw her leave. The river swallowed her every time. But legends come at a price. Maya slept little. When she did, the dreams bled. Her father's voice, Rodriguez's broken body, Peterson's silence. The scar pulled at her skin when she clenched her teeth against the weight of memory. There were nights when she asked herself if she had become what Ramirez always wanted her to be, a ghost, nothing more, a tool of violence, a story. But then she remembered the seals she had pulled out of Colombia alive. She remembered the way Williams had looked at her in the smoke. Respect, gratitude, silent acknowledgement. Hope wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was the kind that stayed hidden in scars until the right moment. Langley. Victor Ramirez stood in his office, watching rain streak across the windows. Reports sat on his desk. Convoys hit. Safe houses burned. Assets gone. And always a whisper tied to the wreckage. The river ghost. For the first time in years, Ramirez felt unease. He poured whiskey into crystal, his hand trembling just slightly. The ghost he thought he had buried with Carlos Cortez had returned. But ghosts, he told himself, could be exorcised. He called Domings. "Find her, hunt her, I don't care how many men it takes. No more rumors, I want her body." Domings's voice was smooth, certain. "We will deliver her. Ghosts bleed, senor." Ramirez ended the call. He stared at the glass in his hand. In the reflection for a moment he thought he saw her, standing behind him, scar gleaming, eyes burning, crossbow raised. He spun. The office was empty. But the river has its own way of haunting men. In the jungle of Colombia, Maya knelt by the riverbank. She dipped her hand into the black current. The water was cold, endless. It whispered the same words her father had spoken years ago. True power comes from what you protect. She looked at her reflection, scarred, hardened, human. The river ghost was not a myth. She was flesh. She was fury. She was patience. And she was not finished. Why did the jungle go quiet that night? Why did even the cicadas fall silent, as if something darker than rain was moving among the trees? The Darien Gap, midnight. Domings had sent 50 men. Mercenaries, ex-soldiers, cartel enforcers. They carried thermal scopes, drones, armored trucks that churned mud into choking rivers. Men who had stalked villages, who had killed without hesitation. They moved with the arrogance of hunters who believed themselves at the top of the food chain. They weren't hunting prey. They were walking into a lesson. The river whispered warnings long before they knew. A snapped twig too precise. A flashlight beam swallowed by fog. A drone's camera lens blinded by sudden static. Then the first man screamed. They found him hanging from a tree, bolt through his wrist, radio crushed in his throat. Not dead, alive, moaning, begging. A warning written in flesh. "Está aquí," he gasped. "She's here." The others tightened ranks, rifles sweeping, nerves stretched thin. They fired into shadows, bullets carving leaves, hitting nothing. One by one, the jungle erased them. A bolt through the drone operator's controls, the screen sparking as the feed died. A flash charge detonated beneath an armored truck, flipping it into the swamp. The sound of a crossbow string, faint as breath, followed by the heavy fall of another man into the mud. By dawn, 23 were dead. 15 scattered into the trees, their discipline shattered. The rest dragged themselves back to Domings's camp with wide eyes and shaking hands. They didn't call her a soldier. They didn't call her an assassin. They called her La Fantasma del Rio, the river ghost. And in the eyes of men who believed only in fear, that meant something. Panama City. Domings slammed a glass onto the table, shattering it. His lieutenant stood silent, watching fury carve his face. She humiliated us, his accent sharpened with rage. 50 men gone. Do you know what that does to my name? One lieutenant shifted uneasily. Senor, she is not ordinary. Domings glared. No one is beyond a bullet. But he knew better. She hadn't fought like a guerrilla. She hadn't fought like a mercenary. She fought like water itself, shaping, waiting, breaking only when it mattered. His men had seen the impossible. That was worse than death. Double the bounty, Domings ordered. Every street, every dock, every jungle trail, I want her hunted. And bring me specialists, men who don't believe in ghosts. But even as he barked orders, he felt it, unease. The river had marked him too. Langley. Victor Ramirez poured another drink, but the whiskey no longer steadied his hands. Reports littered his desk. Kingfisher compromised. Domings's men decimated. A string of operations unraveling, always with the same whisper behind them. The river ghost. He told himself it was a myth. He told himself she was just a scarred girl with a weapon. But myths spread for a reason. Men fought differently when they feared shadows. Empires crumbled because of whispers. And still her name came closer. He locked his office door, opened a hidden drawer. Inside, a photograph, Carlos Cortez, the day he died. Ramirez had kept it as a reminder of victory, but now the man's eyes seemed to accuse him from the paper. He crushed the photo in his hand, but the guilt, once stirred, would not fold so easily. Maya moved like silence through the Panama docks. Fishermen unloaded crates of tuna, unaware of the war playing out in shadows around them. The salt smell clung to her skin. She had been tracking Domings for weeks, letting his anger betray him. He moved faster now, made mistakes, trusted the wrong men. Fear corrupted precision. Through stolen intel, she'd learned about his next shipment, weapons headed to Ramirez's intermediaries. A chance to cut off supply and maybe corner the man himself. She waited in an abandoned crane overlooking the dock, Crossbow steady, eyes tracing every movement below. Patience, always patience. The convoy arrived just before dawn. Trucks rolled in, headlights sweeping. Men shouted orders in Spanish, unloading crates. Domings himself appeared, barking commands, his pistol holstered carelessly at his side. She aimed. But her father's voice whispered through memory, "Not yet. Wait for the current." And then she saw it. Among the crates, one marked with a symbol she recognized, not cartel, not mercenary. CIA property, Ramirez's hand in plain sight. She didn't fire at Domings, not yet. She fired at the crate. The bolt's explosive tip shattered the lock. Grenades inside ignited, fire cascading across the dock. Men screamed, diving for cover. Trucks exploded in waves, metal flying like shrapnel rain. Domings stumbled, cursing, firing blindly into the smoke. Maya was gone. But when he looked up at the crane where the shot had come from, a message was painted in red across the rusted steel. The river remembers. The legend spread faster than any bullet. Dockworkers whispered it. Soldiers muttered it in barracks. Politicians heard it in back rooms. The river ghost wasn't just a name anymore. She was a presence. And Ramirez knew what legends did. They destabilized. They weakened faith. If men feared her more than they trusted him, his empire would crack. He leaned over his desk, eyes bloodshot, whispering to no one but the ghosts he couldn't silence. She's just one woman. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. She was one woman, and that was enough. Maya returned to the river that night. She washed the smoke from her hands, the blood from her sleeve. She thought of the men she had killed, of the eyes that had begged before closing. She thought of the path she had chosen outside the system, carrying justice in shadows. Her reflection wavered in the current. For a moment she didn't recognize herself. Not the soldier, not the girl, not the daughter, just the ghost. A tremor of fear passed through her chest. Not fear of dying. Fear of becoming nothing but this, a shadow with no soul left to protect. But then she remembered Rodriguez, bent over maps with tired eyes. Morgan, steady hands guiding her crossbow. Williams, that look of respect in Colombia. They had seen her humanity. They had believed it was still there. And she swore she would not lose it. Patience, she told herself. Even ghosts need patience. Because the river wasn't finished. Not yet. Why did Ramirez start locking his office door even when he was alone? Why did he catch himself staring at shadows on the walls, as if a scarred face might emerge from them at any second? Langley, midnight. The deputy director of the CIA sat alone, whiskey glass half drained, desk littered with shredded reports. He should have been the image of power. Silver hair immaculate, suit pressed, shoes shining under the sterile light. But power doesn't hide. Power doesn't drink until hands tremble. Power doesn't whisper to empty rooms. Victor Ramirez whispered anyway. She's one woman, just one. But the words didn't soothe. They sounded hollow even to him. Every convoy burned, every deal disrupted, every ally questioned him now. You promised security, they said. You promised control. And all he could do was feed them more lies while the truth crept closer like rising water. The river ghost wasn't just killing his men. She was killing his certainty. Bogota. Maya walked the crowded streets with a hood pulled low. Neon lights flickered against wet pavement, casting the city in restless color. Music throbbed from cantinas. Vendors shouted. Life pulsed all around her, but she moved through it like a shadow. She had spent weeks following the money. Ramirez was careful but not perfect. Offshore accounts, shell companies, private contractors tied to both Washington and Medellin. She built a map in silence, one piece at a time, until it pointed her toward a name, Arturo Vega. Vega wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a cartel killer. He was a banker. The man who moved Ramirez's money through quiet channels, hiding blood behind clean signatures. Vega lived in Bogota's north end, where glass towers scraped the sky and guards in pressed uniforms smiled like professionals. That night Maya slipped past them with ease. Rain helped, shadows helped, patience helped more. She found Vega in his office, alone, typing reports he didn't understand on screens too bright for midnight. He never heard her step behind him until the bolt's tip pressed against his temple. "Don't scream," she whispered. He froze. His reflection in the glass wall showed her scar, her hood, her eyes that didn't blink. "What do you want?" His voice cracked. "Numbers, transfers, Ramirez." Vega's lip trembled. "I can't." The bolt nudged harder. "You can." Within minutes, his hands shook as he opened encrypted files. Maya recorded everything. Wire transfers between front companies, payments to Domings's men, CIA operational budgets laundered through cartel accounts. It was all there. When she had what she needed, Vega whispered, "Please don't kill me." Her finger lingered on the trigger. She could. No one would mourn him. Men like Vega hid murder behind bank codes. But she thought of her father's words. True power comes from what you protect. She lowered the crossbow. "Disappear. If I hear your name again, I won't miss." By the time Vega collapsed into his chair, she was gone, files in her pack, the river already pulling her forward. Rodriguez studied the files on his encrypted terminal. His hands trembled, not from fear but from the weight of truth. "You've done it, Maya," he said into the secure line. "This is proof. Ramirez is compromised. The CIA can't ignore this." Maya's voice was low, steady. "They will ignore it. They'll call it doctored. They'll bury it like they buried Afghanistan." Rodriguez's silence admitted she was right. "Then what do we do?" he asked. The scar on her cheek tightened as she whispered, "We finish it." Ramirez woke in the night to the sound of glass breaking. He grabbed his pistol, heart hammering. The house was silent except for his breath. He moved room to room, finger tight on the trigger, but there was nothing, just shadows, just silence. When he returned to his bedroom, a single bolt stood upright on his pillow, balanced perfectly, waiting. He collapsed into a chair, chest heaving. She had been inside. She had touched his sanctuary. The river ghost wasn't hunting him anymore. She was already here. Maya knew patience would kill him faster than a bolt. Fear was heavier than steel, but patience didn't mean stillness. It meant precision. She infiltrated his world piece by piece. Anonymous leaks to journalists, blurred photos of Ramirez in cartel safe houses, whispers in congressional hallways, each one a cut, each one a stone in his throat. But Ramirez wasn't weak. Cornered men strike hardest. He pulled Domings closer. He armed private security. He bought politicians, generals, judges. And when whispers of a river ghost reached too far, he ordered a strike not in the jungle but in Washington itself. It came on a rainy evening. Maya was walking near Union Station, her hood pulled low, the files encrypted in a drive strapped to her chest. She had planned to deliver them to a journalist who still believed truth had teeth. She felt it before she saw it. The wrong car idling too long. The wrong man pretending to check his watch. The wrong silence between raindrops. The ambush snapped open like a trap. Gunfire ripped across the street. Civilians screamed, scattering. Maya dove behind a pillar, crossbow in hand, before her breath caught. Bullets shattered concrete, sparks flying. She fired blind, one bolt, explosive tip. The car erupted, flames swallowing two gunmen. She rolled, bleeding from a graze across her ribs. Pain seared, but pain was familiar. Pain was memory. A second wave advanced. She dropped another, the bolt punching through his chest, pinning him against a wall like a grotesque painting. Sirens wailed in the distance. Tires screeched as survivors fled. The street reeked of smoke and blood. Maya melted into the alleys, clutching her side, her reflection flickering in broken glass. The city had tasted the river ghost now. Ramirez had crossed a line. And so had she. Ramirez watched the news report from his office. Gang violence, the anchor said. 2 cars destroyed, civilians injured. He turned off the TV. He knew the truth. She had survived again. But for the first time, he didn't feel victory in survival. He felt the river rising around his ankles. Cold, relentless, patient. He poured another drink, hand trembling, whispering into the dark. "She's coming." In a safe house outside Baltimore, Maya stitched her wound in silence. The pain was sharp, but it kept her awake, focused. She watched the rain beat against the windows and thought of her father, of his lesson. Patience is a weapon. She had cut down Domings's men. She had exposed Vega's files. She had forced Ramirez into the open. Now there was only one step left. To face him. And the river whispered the same truth over and over, in every drop of rain, in every breath she drew. Not yet. But soon. Why did Ramirez keep his curtains drawn even in daylight? Why did he startle at every creak in the floorboards of his own home, as if the walls themselves had turned against him? Langley, the deputy director of the CIA, sat in his office, drained of sleep, staring at the same glass of whiskey for an hour without drinking it. He had risen higher than most men ever dreamed. He had built an empire of secrets, carved his fortune in blood disguised as intelligence. And yet he felt hunted, not by a government, not by a rival, but by a single scarred woman with her father's eyes. The river ghost. Every shadow looked like her. Every whisper sounded like her. He had spent months fortifying his world with guards, cameras, armored cars, but power didn't feel like power anymore. It felt like a cage. and cages are where ghosts slip through. Baltimore safe house. Maya traced the scar across her cheek in the mirror. It was silver now, smooth with time, but it burned when she thought of Afghanistan, of her father, of the lives stolen by lies written in official reports. She opened the case. The crossbow gleamed under the dim light. 10 bolts, fewer now, each one fired had carried a price. She ran her hand across the weapon, remembering her father's words by the river. True power comes from what you protect. This was no longer about vengeance. It was about ending something that had poisoned too many lives. Morgan's voice came faint over the encrypted phone. "We've traced Ramirez. Tomorrow night he attends a closed meeting. Langley sub-basement. He thinks he's untouchable there." Rodriguez cut in, his tone hard. "It's your chance, Maya, but remember, if you kill him without proof, they'll bury the truth with you." Maya closed her eyes. She heard the river inside her chest, steady, patient. Proof or not, this ends tomorrow. Langley sub-basement. Ramirez sat at the long, polished table, lights low, the air heavy with the weight of secrets. Around him, 4 men, politicians, contractors, ghosts in suits who thrived in shadows. They discussed budgets, contracts, operations. But Ramirez barely heard. His hand shook each time he reached for his pen. He sensed it before anyone else, the shift in the air, the silence between breaths. The river ghost was here. Maya moved through the corridors like water slipping through stone. Guards patrolled, but their patterns were predictable. Cameras watched, but their feeds looped under Morgan's remote interference. She wore no uniform, no flag, just black clothes, her hood pulled low, the crossbow strapped across her back. She was not there for recognition, she was there for truth. At the sub-basement door, she paused. The weight of years pressed down, her father's death, her team's betrayal, Rodriguez's broken body, Peterson's silence. All of it flowed into this single moment. She breathed, waited between heartbeats, entered. The men at the table froze. A hooded figure stepped from the shadows, crossbow raised. Ramirez's face drained of color. For the first time in his life, the mask cracked. "No." Maya's voice was steady, cold, "Yes." The other men scrambled, reaching for weapons. She fired, one bolt struck the lights, plunging the room into darkness. Another embedded in the table, sparking with a small EMP charge that killed electronics instantly. Phones, radios, alarms dead. Screams echoed. Chaos bloomed. And in the center of it, Ramirez backed against the wall, pistol trembling in his hand. "Do you know how many lives I've controlled?" he spat. "How many wars I've shaped? You think you can destroy me with a bow and a scar?" Maya stepped closer, the crossbow steady. "Not destroy, expose." She tossed a drive onto the table. Vega's files, wire transfers, Domings's contracts, every proof she had gathered, enough to burn him, enough to light fire under the very foundation of his empire. The other men stared at the drive like it was a grenade. Their silence was worse than fear. It was recognition. Ramirez's eyes flicked between them, desperation cracking his voice. "You'll bury this. You'll protect me. We protect each other." But no one moved. Power bleeds fast when fear replaces respect. Maya leveled the crossbow at his chest. For a heartbeat, she thought of ending it here. One bolt, one man erased, justice in its simplest form. But then she heard her father's voice again. "True power comes from what you protect." She lowered the weapon. Ramirez blinked, stunned. You won't kill me." Her voice cut like ice. "Death would make you a martyr to men like these. Living, you'll be nothing but rot on display. Every document is already sent, every account exposed. They'll feed on you to save themselves." He staggered, pistol still shaking. "I'll come for you, I'll." A bolt thudded into the wall inches from his head. He froze. Maya's eyes burned through the hood. "You already tried, you failed." She turned, melted into the shadows, and was gone. The fallout was immediate. News outlets screamed. Deputy director tied to cartels. Billions laundered through CIA fronts. Ramirez's face splashed across every screen, no longer a patriot, no longer untouchable, just another man devoured by the corruption he had sown. He was arrested, paraded in handcuffs, eyes hollow, dignity gone. Politicians who once praised him now spat his name like poison. Domings fled south, hunted by both enemies and allies. And in the whispers beneath all of it, one name carried louder than his downfall. The River Ghost. Weeks later, Maya returned to the Magdalena River. Dawn mist curled over the water. She sat in a canoe like she had as a child, her father's crossbow across her lap. The river whispered around her, gentle now, patient still. She thought of Morgan, too old for more wars but still standing guard. She thought of Rodriguez, his legs gone, but his will sharper than ever. She thought of Peterson's men, alive because she had refused to let the system claim them. She thought of her father, and for the first time she smiled. She had carried his ghost through fire, and in the end she had not become a monster. She had protected. She had endured. As the sun rose, golden across the water, she whispered into the mist. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The current carried her words away, into the endless patience of the river. And the river ghost drifted on,